from an athlete transition perspective is just don't be afraid to reach out for help. I mean, there's a lot of people that are suffering out there, and there's a lot of people like resources, people that want to help.
All right, here we go, Rob. We're live. This is another episode of the Constant Sports Podcast. We have an exciting guest today, speaking about alumni athletes coming into I guess the business world, the corporate world. We'll talk a little youth baseball, coaching, kind of where the industry's gone, and really the whole athlete kind of ecosystem all in one. So, thanks for joining us today, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Connor, for having me. I'm looking forward to this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. I think kind of that what you and the team with Alumni Direct are building out, obviously with your podcast, kind of you've been in the space for 5, 6 years now. I guess probably longer, but the kind of this company as is. So I think you have a lot of cool insight, and especially for the athletes and I guess athlete future entrepreneurs who are watching this, that they can gain from this. And so we'll just kind of start with the overarching theme, kind of broad topic here, but. What originally led you to begin kind of this journey with the Alumni Direct, with your podcast, wanting to help athletes and kind of this transition?
Yeah, sure. So I was was real involved originally in youth sports, and I coached my son in all the ones when he's starting out soccer, basketball, flag football, baseball. Ultimately, baseball was the sport, and coached that for probably like 8 years, 8 or 9 years. Did manage to travel baseball team for probably like 5 or 6 of those years, and so very active with that. And when that got done, then I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do next? And I was in sales and business development for many years, and so I got roped into basically my alumni club, University of Delaware in South Florida, and I was the president of the alumni club for about 7 years. And it was fun. It was social. We did Marlins games, Dolphin games, and all that. But ultimately, we wanted to leverage. There's a lot of business people in it. We wanted to leverage our alumni affinity into helping each other with our businesses, and that basically was kind of the genesis of Alumni Direct, where we wanted to create kind of a LinkedIn meets Facebook geared specifically to alumni. And so we were looking to get different schools on board, in a subscription type model going, with the alumni. But ultimately, a little over 4 years ago now, kind of got introduced to some podcasts where they were talking about the transition out of sport. And for me, I was at college. I ran cross country and track. I got hurt my sophomore year, but it was kind of more about I wasn't going to be a professional runner. I was going to be an Olympian, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But when I listened to the podcast, it really resonated with me, and that's what started my podcast, Athletes, Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. And I interview former college and professional athletes, talk about their transition out of sport into successful business leadership and entrepreneurship. And it's all about teaching, inspiring athletes that there is life after sport. So I kind of took that, the podcast kind of runs parallel to Alumni Direct, where we've created various college communities, but we've also created an athlete community center, which is geared towards anybody that played college and beyond. And so on that, just working, trying to help with jobs, trying to help with different types of things, whether it be learning, could be mental health, financial literacy, different groups on there. So there's a lot going on with this site as well as the podcast, and we're kind of gearing in on talking to schools, athletic departments, and talking about how we can help their athletes in various areas, maybe create additional curriculum along with our partners in some of those areas I just mentioned, career and health and finance. So that's kind of the basics of where we started out with Alumni Direct, where the podcast come out. I'm fortunate to we've done over 200 episodes now with the podcast. So it's a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to having you on as well.
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, looking forward to that. And then I was curious, as we see with athletes, I feel like they're a little bit more in the public eye now. And you can have this high level athlete who spends 4 or 5 years out of school, and then maybe they don't go pro, like you're saying, kind of now what? And so, what have been some of the, I guess, the storylines or next steps that you've seen with Alumni Direct and also with the podcast and whatnot when the career ends? How do they find the next passion? A lot of them aren't going to have resumes because they've been playing sports for all those years. They haven't been having those summer jobs, internships, and so what's kind of next? How do they get those skills that they need to kind of then hit the corporate world?
I think a lot of the skills and are innate in them as an athlete. Like I always like to say, like you kind of mentioned jobs. A lot of times that these athletes, student athletes, they'll, they might go to career service, and career service say, well, you don't have a resume like you mentioned, but they do have a resume. The resume is being an athlete. Okay, so time management, practice, leadership, skills, being part of a team. I mean, there's so much that's involved with being an athlete that I think they bring a lot to the table. I think a lot of companies want to hire athletes just based on that skill set alone. And then it also kind of lends into entrepreneurship, just about everything the adversity that you face as an athlete, something you might face as an entrepreneur. So I think being an athlete kind of prepares them for that, and it's a common theme. I mean, when I've had guests from NFL players, Major League Baseball, I've had NBA players, NHL players, but then I've also had just college wrestlers, and I've had snowboarders and Olympic water skiers and handball players. So it's been across the gamut, but there's a common theme that all of these athletes are pretty driven, and and again, the leadership, everything they bring to the table, and they've brought that into whether it be corporate America and ultimately being on the executive team or just starting their own business. Entrepreneurship, a big one is franchising. In fact, we have one this week. Our podcast is about a guy who played in the NHL and then got into franchising. So there's
Oh
a
wow.
lot these athletes talk about, but I think there is that common bond of what they do that makes them special, and why they're good to not only hire but also to be in that leadership or entrepreneurial position.
Right. And I was curious, I mean, off the top of your head, maybe have you seen certain sports or certain, I guess athletes take down one course than the other? I mean, you mentioned like handball. I've never really been any handball athletes, so I don't know if, are they more driven towards like tech sales or tech kind of entrepreneurs, or have you seen any correlation there?
Really, I think it's just more based on what they majored in school or what they're comfortable with. And I mean, I think the one thing you kind of hit on before is I think is passion is really important. And the I guess the big thing is the preparation for life after sports. I mean, a lot of schools don't really do a good job with that. I mean, they're getting better, but they just don't necessarily have those programs. So they might have a little bit here and there. The coaches work with the athletes up, but when they're done, it's really like what's there for them. Even if they're fortunate enough to play professionally, they don't have a place to go back to their college to tap into those resources to help. And I think that's the common theme is kind of lack of education on what's next. And so I think a lot of the answers and stuff I get, I think are powerful and great advice to like, hey, maybe that athlete went a certain way and they didn't necessarily prepare for it, but now they're giving the advice to make sure you prepare for it, find your passion. What do you want to do? Who do you know? And just kind of take it
Yeah.
from there.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And I think too, especially with, your work in the space, I'd be curious to get your thought on the school side and the university. I mean, you would think they'd have the necessary resources, or you think there's just too many athletes to be involved? What do you think is kind of the disconnect for them?
I think a big problem is the bandwidth. Like you said, I think there's maybe not enough people to go around, especially when you look at some of the smaller schools. Like I don't know what kind of budgets they have, but their athletic departments are smaller. So for them to have the resources to do to do that training and stuff like that aren't necessarily there. I mean, you do see it seems like a lot of the bigger schools they do have academic counselors specific to athletes, advisory committees and stuff. I mean, we talked a little offline about the student athlete advisory committee, the SAC committee that a lot of schools have, where typically they'll have two athletes from each team be representative and kind of bring everything together. So there's some things out there, but I think to answer your question, I think a lot of it is just people they just don't have the manpower to do it, or I mean maybe in some cases they just don't have the interest to do it. I think the coaches do, but then it's on an individual team by team basis.
Mhm. Yeah, and when speaking of the smaller schools, like we mentioned before, maybe offline too, but it was the D2s or D3s. That's just not. They just don't have, like you said, don't have the resources necessarily. And a lot of these athletes now, you have a good year at an FCS school or a D2 school, you jump up and you're playing at the D1 level, and then there's still those athletes that are left behind, so to speak, at the D3 school or D2, and I think it's just a kind of a revolving door like you're speaking with the bandwidth with the staff or whoever works there, that there's just too many ins and outs and people coming all over, all over the place from the school. And so I think it'll be an interesting sector to watch, especially. And you mentioned earlier kind of curriculum. I'd be curious what maybe some of your thoughts on the curriculum. Is it kind of job placement curriculum? Is it time management skills, budgeting skills? What's kind of the curriculum looking like?
Probably all of the above we mentioned, but I think a big thing is yeah, the career, just the preparation for that, the skills to know. I think a big thing and kind of my strong suit is networking, connecting, and I think there could be more education on that. I've talked to athletes that are young athletes still in college and just wishing even going back to high school that they were taught more about that because I think it's so important to build the relationships along the way. So as you're building those relationships, especially while you're still playing the game, are key to that. And then looking at financial literacy obviously is a big thing. I think especially now with NIL, there needs to be more education on guess what you have to pay taxes. Set up an LLC so you can cover your expenses, the taxes, everything else. You look at I think curriculum on mental health also just trying to help some of these athletes that are struggling, uh, letting them know that there's people out there that want to help. I mean, there's I've come across a couple companies in the space where they're working, third party companies working specific with the athletic department to kind of be that, again, that maybe neutral third party ear that so like that athlete doesn't necessarily have to go back to their athletic department or coaches. They might feel that they don't want to do that. They want to keep it private. So having that third party company come in and do that, and maybe just teach classes on that. It could be franchising. I mean, there's so many different avenues in the business space or career space or the health space that I think different curriculum can be developed to help out and just just getting people prepared that hey, when sports are over, you got a long time ahead of you still. Right? Don't just
Yeah.
you're not just the athlete and name your other things.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's going to go a long way, especially with building those athletes. And I want to talk a little bit too about kind of alumni direct. And you know, I was looking at your website, and it's kind of your alumni network reimagined. And so, what is it about kind of the connections to alumni? As like why is that important, right? To build those relationships is kind of what I'm trying to get at for the athletes, or building that out.
Yeah, I think it's the whole idea of having that common bond. I mean, for me, going to Delaware, like I'll if I see a Delaware alumni, I always say that person could ultimately be a jerk, right? But
Yeah.
my first inclination, oh my God, you went to Delaware, like where
Yep.
did you go? What restaurants, what bars did you go on campus? Who are the professors? Even if there's a big age gap, and I think people will tend to help fellow alumni. It's kind of like yeah, I always say from a job perspective, I give the example if I'm interviewing five people and they all have the same credentials and one went to University of Delaware, I'm probably gonna hire the Delaware person. And I think
Yeah.
most people think
Uh-huh.
that way. So it's that, but I mean I think it's the affinity in general. As an athlete, most of us that play sports or have played sports, you start playing maybe when you're 5 years old, maybe even earlier, right? And so even though it might be different sports, it's still that same the team, the chemistry, the practicing, everything that goes into being an athlete. And so I think when you talk to athletes, even if they're in different sports, there's that common bond again, that affinity where we might be a baseball player, a basketball player, a football player, but bottom line is we did some kind of sport and we did a lot of the same things and the practice and everything that went into it. So now that we have something common, let's take it to the next level in our relationship and help each other, whether it's businesses or just
Right.
friendships. I think people want to get together with people that have things in common with them.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. And I think that was probably a catalyst into kind of building these communities and, kind of having those affinities with groups and people like you've been mentioning. And speaking, you said some other things in there that got me circling back to youth baseball. And I know you've coached that, had the travel team. And I was just curious what your thoughts are on the current model of youth baseball and travel baseball as it's youth sports is exploding. So I'd be curious your take as an expert in the space.
It's interesting. I mean, I look back and my son is 30 now, so we're talking like when I started with him 25 years ago. But things have changed. I think and now it's more. Um, when I was back then, you were still kind of singular in sports. Depends on where you're at. I mean,
Hmm.
when I
Hmm.
was growing up, people played multiple sports. Nowadays, I mean, people still do play multiple sports, but there's a lot of focus and concentration on the travel sports of like you're in your thing, your travel baseball, your travel hockey, soccer, football, whatever, basketball, whatever it might be, and you stay in that lane. And depending on where you're at, like in Florida, you can play all year round. So I think it's definitely it's gotten more expensive for sure. I mean, because I think more people are, when I was doing, I was paying a coach like training and stuff like that, like a former professional athlete, baseball player that worked with my son. And I think nowadays probably people are paying even more money for that. The rates of coaches, private coaches, are probably going up. But if someone has talent, I think it definitely can help them, in progressing along the way to, what's next. I mean, you got your travel sports. You ultimately, I guess, going to probably play a high school sport if you're fortunate enough and good enough to play a college sport. And if you're really fortunate, like the 1% or less, then you get to be a professional athlete.
Yeah, and especially those breakdowns. Like I said, I was just curious because we've seen, like you alluded to, the rising cost in sports and travel teams and where it's going, and we're seeing a bunch of these. I guess there's been a few roll-ups as far as sports properties or sports leagues getting bought up, and so I think it's a crazy spot. But I was just curious your thoughts there, and then as far as kind of the podcast, that you've been running since 2022, is that right, or was it before?
We've been doing it for 4 years, or a little over 4 years
Or
now. So
okay.
I think we started in 2022. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And I was curious what, I guess you don't have to name names, but what have been some of your favorite guest topics or stories that you've had, since you've been running that podcast for a few years?
Um, what's interesting is from a well, I can't you can't say there's a lot of successful. I mean, athletes. A lot of them, like the college athletes that don't go on professional. I mean, maybe they're getting a little bit of head start. I mean, I've had CEOs on, which was kind of cool. What one guy, Tim Wright, was on, great guy, and Tim played football at Rutgers, and then ultimately he played in the NFL. He played with Tampa, and then he played with the Patriots. And his funny story, because he gets on, he holds up his hand, and he's got the Super Bowl ring on there, and he tells
Yeah.
the story about how Tom Brady, like recognized him, and when he got traded there, it's like, hey, you and me. I know you're Timmy Wright. We're getting a lot of touchdowns together, and so that was kind of cool. And I've had some just interesting across all, like so many different types of fields that these people are in. You know, whether it's technology, sports related, non-sports related. A lot of people like franchising. I've had several in that area that's been kind of interesting, and they seem to do well. Uh, I think just kind of the having the different sports too that a lot of I don't really. I mean, I'm a baseball, football guy for the most part. I mean, I like basketball too, and hockey I'll follow a little bit, but it's just all these different sports that are out there now, and so it's interesting to hear. Again, if you talk about like snowboarding or you like saying team
Yeah.
handball or handball
Yeah.
or like what's that? So it is interesting to learn about different sports as well as like what they're doing. But yeah, I'm trying to think of other. I mean, I just had a lot of good episodes. I mean, it's been a pretty good mix between male and female athletes as well. I mean, more
Hmm.
male athletes, but I've had a good amount of female athletes too. And one of the surprises too is some of the younger athletes. I just get done. I'm like, man, they're just so sharp. Like you just start
Yeah.
talking to them, and I'm sure you do too. Like I edit my own podcast, so as I'm editing, I'm just listening back, or when I'm actually doing the podcast itself, just some of the things people are saying. I'm taking mental notes and saying, oh boy, that's really cool, good stuff.
Definitely. Did you ever have hosting a podcast on your life's bingo card?
No.
It just came about as you're building out Alumni Direct, and yeah, it's a perfect match.
Yeah, it just it fell into it was great, and I mean the fact that we alumni directors for everybody, but like we do kind of have focused on athletes, and it's just my whole life was in sales and marketing, business development in print in the printing industry, and when I ultimately walked away from that, and as alumni direct was already started, but when I got into the podcast, just everything kind of funneled in, so it's been a lot of fun of just also developing a lot of partnerships with my podcast guests. Just working together with them on different projects after the podcast. I mean, that's been pretty rewarding. Just I guess having that common ground that we have as being athletes, but just some of the same missions and all that. It's kind of cool.
Right. So then like you said, do you, with these partnerships, do you do a lot of kind of like business development marketing as well, or is it mostly just kind of the kind of build, keeping those relationships
No,
intact?
a lot of business development marketing. Yeah, yeah, working with
Okay.
just various companies or getting into introductions. Just
Hmm.
for me, when I'm talking to people, I kind of listen to what they're saying and just I automatically think of who can I connect them with. And so it's been, as I hear things on the podcast that might resonate, or just I usually get together with them afterwards. Not everybody, but most of the people I've had on the podcast will doing follow up calls, and we find things where we can work together and help each other out.
Hmm. Would you say kind of being a, I don't know if it's the right word, a connector, a relationship connector? Would you say that's one of the bigger skills or traits that young athletes, entrepreneurs getting into the space could have?
Yeah, I think connecting is critical, and I think it's with being on a team and the different things you do as an athlete, I think it kind of lends to it. You just need to be open to it. I mean, some people are intimidated by it. I mean, my family, always says to me that's kind of my superpower. Is somebody that the connector, the networker, and all that. But I think anybody could do it. I think if you have a good attitude towards it, and just kind of, I always have a pay it forward attitude of just how can I help you, and I think it goes a long way when you have that attitude versus just somebody constantly looking for help and saying help me, help me, help me, who can you introduce me to, versus
Right.
like who can I introduce you to, and then hopefully it's gonna kind of come back the other way.
Mhm. Yeah, agreed. Well said. And I think as you've been kind of now doing some more business development, you obviously have these marketing and sponsorships. Do you see some untapped industries in sports business that you've seen some companies or some startups start to go down?
um, I think I mean you're seeing a lot of some of these different sports tech companies. They're I mean it's just across the gamut the companies that I've come across. I mean, well, some of them are um, like new products or services, geared towards athletes or towards the public, whereas other ones are more. I guess that's the big thing is just the products and solutions, what they have. But I don't. Did that answer your question? I kind
Yeah,
of.
no, I was mostly just curious kind of where, with business, sports business people, I just like to hear their thoughts and kind of the trends and the ways of the industry.
Yeah,
So
and there's a lot of different sports platforms out there too, and different sports groups. So I think what you're finding is some of them are professional athlete related. So obviously you had to be a professional athlete to be in them. Other ones are just athlete in general, a college space, and so I think these networks that are forming are helping out. And then I guess the big thing too is just tapping into alumni. Like your alumni engagement, from your school or whatever schools you might have gone to, or doesn't have to necessarily be a school. It could be where you work. There's alumni basis there. I mean, there's a lot of different things, but I think it's important to do that, to get in these groups, and like there's no sense in being a lone wolf. I mean, I think everybody like you can work as a team and tap into these various groups and see how everybody can work together and help each other out.
yeah, great point, great point. And as we kind of start wrapping up here, where can just heavy into alumni, obviously connecting. Where can people find alumni direct? How do they get involved? How do they get signed up? All that good stuff.
Sure. So you can go to alumnidirect.com is our website, and if you go out there and there's not a school associated to, we have a thing where you can just say what your school is, and we can always add them to it. We're always looking for ambassadors to start getting things going with a particular school. I mean, there's different groups. We're talking to colleges, athletic departments, all that. So I mean, just people reaching out. I'm on LinkedIn. Rob Finkelstein on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and Alumni Direct. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. So just finding those different areas where you can either look at Alumni Direct or myself personally, even on our YouTube channel for Alumni Direct is where we have our podcast. It's also across all the networks, so in Spotify and Apple. But encourage people to reach out and always willing to give a helping hand and love connecting with people and seeing what we can do to help each other out.
Perfect. Love it. Yeah. So you heard it here. Go to those. We'll have all those in the description and everywhere. And before we go, I like to do a little rapid fire. I know you're a baseball fan here, and so sometimes when I ask this question, that there can be two answers. But so if you could be the GM of any Major League Baseball team, would it be your favorite baseball team? I know it's the Mets, but would you be the GM of that team, or would you pick somebody else and try to start them up and build a championship somewhere else?
I'd probably be an armchair quarterback and go with the Mets.
Okay, you're gonna go with the Mets. Okay, okay.
Yeah, just because I know their farm system and all that. You know, David Stearns is doing good job. I mean, there's things that as Met fans, disgruntled Met fans, we have our opinions on some of that stuff. But it's a good question. But I think I would probably do my favorite team.
Okay, gotcha. And then if you could go back and rewatch one game in person, now I guess or in the future, wherever you take it, what game or event would you go to?
Question. It's been a long time since the Mets have won, so I might go back to like 1986.
Yeah.
Uh, watch one of their games there. Winning it all. I guess I always talk about Super Bowls too. Being a Giants fan, I'd go back to some of those Super Bowls and watch one of those. But those were key. I mean, probably one of the great events I always talk about, non-related to the sporting event itself. But my son and I do a lot of baseball road trips, and we went to see Mike Piazza get inducted in the Hall of Fame, and Ken Griffey Jr. went at the same
Wow.
time. It was just an incredible sports experience.
Awesome. Yeah, I have to put it on my bucket list. That's a good one. Have they had? I guess that was probably a few years ago then.
Yeah,
If
it's well
when Mike
back. I
and
think it's
yeah.
probably about gosh, it might have been like as much as like 10 years ago at this point.
Okay. Side note, did Mike Piazza, did he play for the Padres? Do you remember?
He did first season.
Okay, okay.
He played for the Dodgers. Then he got traded to the
Yeah.
Marlins, and the Marlins quickly traded
Okay.
him to the Mets. And then he did play a little bit with the Padres after the Mets.
Okay, that's what I thought. 'Cause I remember watching it as a kid, but I couldn't remember if he was on another team with the Padres. But side note for the listeners, I know, but that just had a quick memory went through my head, and I couldn't remember. So, well, we appreciate you coming on today, Rob, and talking to us about the connections, being a connector, obviously using those skills as athletes, and then also transitioning those into your everyday lives. And we'll have Rob's connections where you can find him, Alumni Direct, link to his podcast, and him in the description. But before we go, Rob, I like to give the guest any last words or thoughts before we go.
I would just say that from an athlete transition perspective, is just don't be afraid to reach out for help. I mean, there's a lot of people that are suffering out there, and there's a lot of people like resources, people that want to help, whether it's friends, family, other athletes, other companies. I mean, we're trying to do a lot of that with our podcasts and with Alumni Direct, and just a lot of people I deal with is we want to make an impact in that space, and so just really harping on the fact of athletes is you're not in it alone. Just definitely reach out for help.
Great, well said. Perfect way to put a cap on the episode here, and we're looking forward to talking soon, following Alumni Direct, driving some more listeners over to your podcast. And thanks again, Rob, and we'll see you soon.
That's my pleasure. Thanks, Connor.
You got it.